Professor Banerjee is an assistant professor of marketing at the Tilburg School of Economics and Management. She is broadly interested in online marketplaces and e-commerce. Particularly, she aims to look at how consumers make use of various cues in an e-commerce setting and how these cues might have an impact on decision making. Examples include user-generated content such as reviews, ratings, non-focal prices advertised by a platform on their product page, and recommender systems. The primary methodologies she uses are causal inference experiments, quasi-experiments, and applied machine learning. In fact, the paper she's presenting today is a leverages a quasi-experiment. In a separate stream of projects, she's also interested in applications of digitization for equity and development, which is again an awesome field and growing field. She received her PhD in marketing from BU. Prior to that, she did her BSc from Calcutta University and MSc from Warwick University as a Commonwealth Scholar in Economics. And we are so pleased to have Shrabastee with us. I know it's summer, but she was kind enough to accept our invitation and be here with us to discuss this awesome topic. I think just a few housekeeping rules. Maybe the talk will be like 45 minutes, 45 minutes, and the rest we can devote to questions. And if any of you have any questions, you can please put it in the chat window and we can then take it from there. Without further ado, Shrabastee, thanks a lot once again, and I hand it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Anuj, for that kind introduction. And I'm really excited to be here and share this project with all of you. As Anuj said, please feel free to put questions in the chat. I might not be able to monitor the chat myself, but Anuj, if I miss something, please interrupt me and let me know. And yeah, at the end, we can have some time for general questions, but for clarification questions, you can interrupt me during the talk. That's totally fine. So this is joint work with Kaizu and Shaonishi, who are both my colleagues at McGill and Bocconi and also my good friends. So we've been working on this for about a year now, and this is an exciting area for all of us, and we are looking forward to your thoughts and feedback on this project. So essentially, the premise for this work is predicated by the fact that platform businesses are ubiquitous and they're everywhere, and all of us know that they kind of form the backbone of the modern internet economy, so to speak. So you have all of these different platforms which deal with a lot of different products and services, and while the individual value propositions and the individual modes of operation for these platforms might be different, what is the same is how they are constructed under the hood eventually. So at the core of every platform, you have a two-sided market or maybe even a multi-sided market, and the platform kind of serves to link all of those different markets together and facilitate transactions between the different sides in the market. And because of the way platforms function, these issues of network effects and cross-site network effects are very important. So how do each of these sides interact among themselves and with each other? And obviously, any kind of platform, the one key thing that they have to deal with if they want to become a profitable business is to find a model for monetization. And interestingly, this is actually the one of the most difficult and most interesting and fascinating issues that any platform company must address. This is a quote from the Platform Revolution, which was written by some researchers who are very active in the field of platform economics. And generally, although you might think the issue of monetization is probably the simplest, it turns out to be quite complicated, especially in a platform model. And there are a few reasons for that. There are a lot of choices that platforms have at their disposal when they are trying to figure out how to monetize. And to give some examples, the first set of choices that the platform has is how should you charge? And by that, what I mean is, Should you charge a transaction fee? And we know that platforms like Uber or Airbnb do this. But you could also go a different way. You could charge users for enhanced access. And we know that platforms like LinkedIn do this. So you can use the free version of LinkedIn, but you can also upgrade and use the full access version, which gives you a few additional features. And then you could also charge third-party producers for access to a community. And one example of this that I can think of is something like Upwork, where basically if you are a freelancer, you can join the platform for a fee just to have access to all of the people to whom you can sell your services. So essentially, that's a different kind of model. And you can think of many such models that exist and different platforms that leverage different models. And also the other segment of this is who exactly should you charge? Should you charge all users like Netflix does? Or should you charge one side and then subsidize the others? For example, YouTube, by default, they charge advertisers and then they provide users with a free access account. But of course, now we know that they are also, getting more and more into the enhanced access domain where they want you to sign up for an ad-free version of YouTube. So that's also there. And then you could also subsidize stars, like with Uber Gold, you get points, and then you get some discounts for being a loyal customer of that platform. Or you could subsidize users who are price sensitive. For example, you have student subscriptions for some of these platforms. So essentially, all of these decisions involve different trade-offs, and they can often have some unintended consequences. And in the overall research domain of platform economics, something that people have looked at a lot is how these decisions of monetizing certain features can hurt network effects. And by network effects, what I mean is every user on the platform derives some value from the other entities that also exist in that platform. And so if after imposing a fee, a few people drop out, the value for the other remaining customers in the ecosystem also decreases. And then you can imagine that way everyone else leaves the platform and then the platform unravels. So obviously you are on Facebook because your friends are on Facebook. So if someone leaves and you don't have any friends anymore, you leave as well, and then the platform is nullified basically. And then this is obviously an important consideration for any platform, but then just going beyond the number of platform participants, monetization can also have other dimensions of unintended consequences, which may not just be monetary. So, for example, it could disproportionately impact certain marginalized entities more than more established entities, and we'll get more into some examples of what that might mean. And it could also reduce the overall diversity of participants. So you might just get a certain kind of person that participates in the ecosystem. And eventually, all of these different dynamics might lead to supply concentration, and resultantly, the actual consumers who are on the platform to get some sort of service, they might experience some demand mismatches. And in our project, what we are going to be focusing on is this kind of non-monetary sort of dimension of monetization, which is to say, how are these different agents affected and what kinds of downstream consequences can monetization have beyond just, traditionally the concern of network effects. And the context that we'll be looking at is Goodreads.com. So Goodreads is, I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. It's essentially a cataloging website for books, and it was acquired by Amazon in 2013, I think. So mostly it allows users to search for books, annotations, codes, etc. And it is quite a big platform. So it has 120 million members as of 2020. And overall, it's best known for being a tool of book discovery and as a curator of user-generated book reviews. So that's how most of us know Goodreads. But one, understudied feature of Goodreads in research, and also something that many of us don't know about that much, is this feature that they have, which is called Goodreads Giveaways. So this feature is, I think, mostly active in US and Canada. So I, for example, didn't know about it, having mostly, used Goodreads back in India. And when I was in the US, I still didn't know about this giveaways feature. But basically, the idea is that the author or the publisher of a book can go on Goodreads and set up a giveaway contest. And then users can enter a draw, so basically a lucky draw sort of thing, to get a chance to win the book. And then the author or the publisher sends out copies to winners when the contest ends. So this is an example of what that looks like, and this is an example of a giveaway page. So as a consumer, I can go on Goodreads and enter the giveaway, and as an author, I can go and host a giveaway on the Goodreads platform. So that's essentially how this thing works. And the natural experiment that we'll be exploiting is that this feature on Goodreads, this giveaways feature, was offered for free till 2018. And then what happened post 2018, Goodreads started to charge books and authors a participation fee just to be able to give away their books. And of course, keep in mind that authors and publishers anyway would incur a cost to give away copies of their books, because if you do a draw and you give away 500 copies of your books for free, that cost is anyway incurred by you. But now what Goodreads did is they imposed an additional charge just to be able to use the platform to do this promotional activity. And the approximate revenue for Goodreads from this scheme is around $5 to $8 million. And while that's not a large amount, it can still be substantial from certain perspectives. So before actually doing this, they weren't making any money from giveaways, but now they are. And this is the announcement that was posted on the Goodreads blog when they, kind of announced the monetization. And some of the notable features of this was that this was quite surprising for a lot of authors. So this came pretty much out of the blue. And there wasn't a lot of lead time that would allow the different players in this ecosystem to adjust. So basically, this was announced in end of November 2017, and the scheme started to be monetized on January the 9th. So there was only a month in between for people to kind of react to the situation. And overall, the author community did not react very well. So essentially, this is a post on Reddit where someone, was very surprised by this additional fee that was levied. And then they said that, they had already noticed that the number of giveaways has dropped a lot as a response to this. And, this doesn't seem to be a very fair way of treating the author community. And there was other media coverage as well, which was kind of not very positive about this whole situation. And then the reason that people were not very positive, and the angle that we are also going to be exploring more in this project, is basically the fact that when this fee was added, it kind of added an additional barrier for independent authors and independent publishers to promote their books. And then the main value proposition of Goodreads had always been a way in which book lovers can discover different kinds of books and authors can reach their audience. And then now, if this particular promotional tool started to be monetized, then that might make this process difficult for independent authors. And that's kind of what this article is hinting at, and we'll talk more about that through the talk. So essentially, what we want to know is, how does monetization affect the giveaways ecosystem of authors and publishers, books, and finally consumers? So we'll be looking both at the supply side and the demand side. So on the supply side, we want to see, is there a reduction in participation? If so, where exactly is it concentrated? And eventually, do the product offerings on giveaways themselves change in some way in response to this shock? And then on the demand side, we'll try to see, how does this have an impact on consumer level metrics? So when people get a book on giveaway, are they actually happy with what they're getting? And comparing the situation pre and post monetization, can we say something about how this satisfaction, this consumer satisfaction is changing. And then if there is a change on the demand side, what exactly is the underlying mechanism? So to not leave any surprises, if you have to log off before the end of the talk, I just want to foreshadow what we find. Is there a reduction in participation? Yes, there is. Where is it concentrated? As we would expect, it is concentrated among these less established and independent publishers. And in terms of the book offerings, we see that the diversity of offerings in terms of the genres changes, and we see that more popular genres gain market share. And in terms of demand, we see that the number of reviews actually increases in response to participating in a giveaway, but the average ratings of the book reduces. And we further explored this to find that the mechanism for this is consistent with this idea of a Groupon effect, which means that more people, if you offer a product on a deal, or if you have some sort of promotion on a product, more people might eventually find and use the product, but the individual fit of the consumer to the product is not that good, and that's what leads to lesser satisfaction in this situation. So before going to this, I think I had a question.
Yeah, Tanmay has a question.
Yeah, if I just may. So,
hi, go ahead.
So when this kind of a platform, when they try to initiate this kind of monetization problem, it looks very dynamic problem. For example, they reach from one equilibrium to another equilibrium, right? There is a change in whole distribution, at least on one side. And through this network effect, there is also change in another side. So what correct me if I'm wrong, so what you find, this looks very short-term impact. At least if this market is not that concentrated, there would be entry of other platforms might be, who might be catering, other customers who left our platform. So this is how one thinks. So this is a very short-term impact. The long-term impact might be.
That's a very good point. I think it is true that what we measure here, and usually what you can measure with a natural experiment, is kind of more at the short-term level. So you have this shock, you kind of see what's happening, but we don't look at general equilibrium effects in that sense. But one thing that is interesting is that this particular feature that Goodreads offers, although there are some other platforms that authors might use to promote their work, Goodreads has been kind of the go-to for anything related to books, and it's kind of the biggest network of authors and of people who are, kind of devoted readers. So it is hard to find a comparable platform. So if I am an independent author and I can't afford to participate here anymore, it's not like I have a direct competitor. So for example, this is not like Uber versus Lyft or Uber versus Ola, where you can easily switch. The switching costs are kind of higher here. So that's, I think, one angle. But yeah, currently we are looking at other platforms to see if the people who do leave here kind of spill over and go somewhere else. So that is definitely one angle to explore. But yeah, that's a good point. So this is not a general equilibrium effect. It's more kind of what's happening as a snapshot.
Yeah, but just a quick follow-up. So in the long run, there could be, maybe their product differentiation may end. So there could be entry of other platforms. At least, even if not, it might not be concentrated in your particular research agenda, but it's a topic. But this also the broader relation for the other platforms who might be thinking of monetizing this kind of policies. So there might be entry of other. So it depends on the market structure, right?
Sure. No, I agree with that. Sure. So eventually, the way that it evolves and what happens in the long run would, of course, depend on your competition as well. And yeah, you're right that we are not modeling the whole system in that sense. We are kind of constrained to what's happening in this platform. But of course, yeah, you can expand over to try and understand what's happening to this segment as a whole. If you are kind of trying to monetize, you have to have a sense of who your competitors are, for sure. That's a good point. Cool. So particularly what we are looking at here is, just trying to think of monetization from a more holistic standpoint. And typically research in this area has mostly focused on matching markets like Uber and Airbnb. So the goal here is to try and think of monetization from a slightly broader angle beyond just the financial metrics. And then we can also, because of the data we have, we can also model changes that occur on both sides of the giveaways marketplace. So we have authors and publishers as well as readers. So this gives us a unique opportunity to see, how these things are changing within the platform as a response to this particular policy. And eventually, at a broader level, we are trying to offer some insights into the unintended consequences of monetizing creative platforms in particular. And like I said, when you think of Uber and Airbnb type platforms, they have a very specific set of problems that they are dealing with, which are obviously important. But then here, beyond just matching, there are also other issues. For example, what we see with the diversity of genres, these are issues that don't usually come up in platform research, and we are trying to, kind of look a little bit deeper into that. All right, so for the rest of the talk, I will talk about the data. Maybe I'll skip the related literature in the interest of time, but I'll go over the data. The results that I just gave you an overview of, go into a little bit of detail on that, and then finally talk a little bit about implications, and then we can have a little bit of time at the end for overall questions. Anuj had a question.
Yeah, so Akshay had a question in the chat window that did you check the overall customer satisfaction with the platform?
The overall customer satisfaction. Yeah, that's a good question. We didn't do that. What we have basically is data on the reviews and ratings for the books that did enter giveaway. So what we'll be doing with this impact on consumers part is seeing whether participating in a giveaway is having an effect on the reviews and ratings of that particular book. So that's the extent to which we are doing this. We haven't done a high level, look at whether satisfaction with Goodreads as a whole is changing. So yeah, this is basically what we'll be doing.
Thank you.
All right, perfect. So let's quickly skip through this. Not much new here. What I kind of wanted to say is we are broadly contributing to three main streams of literature. One is monetization in creative good platforms. The other is diversity in production and consumption. And the third piece, which is related to promotional reviews and ratings and how satisfaction might change if you get something on promotion, that is its own stream of literature as well. So, if you are more interested in this particular area, you can look up these papers, which are really interesting, and they all kind of deal with these issues, which are becoming very important from the perspective of platform economics. All right, so in terms of data, we have giveaways that were hosted on Goodreads from 2008 to 2020. So we have all of that. And then we have metadata on books, authors, and publishers, and we have star ratings, which are associated with each book, and also the text of reviews. We have around 300,000 giveaway events for roughly 200,000 books. So some books do participate in giveaways multiple times, but it's rare for books to do it more than twice or thrice. But yeah, most books do it once, obviously. And then the main results that I'll be showing you here kind of focus on a period between January 2016 to February 2020. February 2020, for obvious reasons, we don't want to include any COVID data and mess things up. And this actually retains about 91% of the books and 77% of the giveaways. So that's what we'll be looking at here. Okay, so first we want to see the impact on the supply side. This figure is quite telling. So you have January of 2018 here, and you see that immediately after that, there is a pretty large drop in the number of giveaways that are hosted on Goodreads. And of course, the next question is the reduction in participation symmetric across different publishers and authors, or is there some asymmetry in these effects? So to look at whether there is asymmetry, what we do is we construct a measure of supply concentration using the Herfindahl index. And how we do it is we take all publishers that participate in a giveaway on a given month, and then we model what's the share of that publisher in that month. And the way to do that is kind of taking the share of the publisher in proportion to the total number of publishers, and you kind of squared that and sum that up. And when we standardize that index and plot it, you see that very clearly this is the pre-period, this is when monetization happens, and in the post-period, there is a significant increase in supply concentration. So there is more concentration in publishers here. And now the next question is, if there is concentration, who are these big players that are dominating the ecosystem? And is it really that the bigger publishers are dominating, or is something else happening? So to understand that better, it's helpful to think of how the publishing industry is structured as a whole. So you have traditional publishing where the author first has to go to a literary agent, then to a publisher, and finally to the market. And one way in which the internet revolution has actually, really helped independent publishers and authors is to include this self-publishing option, where authors can kind of bypass all of these intermediaries and directly take their book to the online market. So they don't need to go through all of these different iterative processes. And so you can think of self-publishing as the set of people who would potentially benefit a lot from having a giveaway, because they don't have a lot of resources at their disposal. They might want to market their books using Goodreads, and potentially we want to see what's happening to them as a response to monetization. And what we find is that the top publishers actually are gaining at the expense of self-publishing. So to look at this, let's recap first who the big five are. So these are basically publishers who account for the vast proportion of English book publications, and you've probably heard of all of them before. And what we find is that the monthly proportion of big five publishers increases by more than 15% after monetization, whereas the proportion of self-publishing houses drops to less than 5%. So effectively, self-publishing houses are driven out of the market. And this becomes even clearer when you look at this picture. So basically, in the pre-period, even in terms of raw numbers, they were almost the same. So we do see that self-publishing houses were using this feature quite a lot. And then after monetization, their participation drops drastically, and then the big five become more concentrated. So that's kind of how this plays out, and we see that the self-publishing books are losing out. And again, we do a simple regression where we model the proportion, rather the probability that a certain book is going to be from a big five publisher after monetization. So post-monetization is a dummy variable, 0 or 1, and beta 1 is the coefficient we are interested in. And we have standard fixed effects for time trends. And doing that, what we see is for a given book, the likelihood that it's going to be from a big five publisher rises by 11% after monetization. And consequently, the likelihood that it will be from a self-publishing house goes down by 5%. And that's what you find here as well. So yeah, Tanmay.
I mean, so these are at the intensive margin, right? But so what happens at the extensive margin? That would also be interesting to know. So it could be because there is more associative matching between both sides, suppliers and demand, and it could also be possible that some suppliers, they might have just gone out of platforms. So that's why there is an increase in concentration, right?
Right. So we are going to be looking at some other angles of this as well. So we have basically, here we are seeing what's the characteristics of the publishers who are in the ecosystem before versus after. And then we are also going to see what happens to the actual products that these publishers are bringing. So you see that kind of one set of publishers are dropping out, but it, like you're saying, the intensive versus extensive, maybe the products that are being supplied in the ecosystem don't change that much. So that's something we want to explore and see, is that really the case? So what are the other impacts that this is having? All right, so why do we care about diversity in this setting, and why is it important? So essentially, a very important value proposition of any online market is that it allows for a long tail, which traditional brick and mortar settings do not. So if you have niche customers with niche needs, you have an online store where they can go and find their particular interests. And this is obviously important from the perspective of promoting an e-commerce platform. And in general, book lovers tend to enjoy variety, because if there is a diverse selection of books, that would attract readers with different interests, and then that would also satisfy variety seeking. And if there is more diversity, there is going to be larger cross-site network effects as well, because the supply side becomes more appealing collectively. And you can think of, the Kolkata Book Fair, for example, where the big value proposition for something like this is that it unites so many different publishers, which, of course, you could go to a bookstore, but to have an event at that scale, the value of it comes from the fact that it's a one-stop shop, basically, and you can go and browse many different kinds of genres and kind of see how that, see what you like and what you don't like. And in this particular setting, what we see is that the genre of the books that do participate in giveaway become more concentrated as well, like the supply. And to look at this, we make use of the Goodreads shelves that Goodreads kind of allows people to label each book as. So basically, we use these shelves to infer the genre of the book, and then we take the top 50, and then we compute a standardized entropy of genres for a given year month. And the entropy is quite similar to the concentration measure I just showed you before. So eventually it's modeling something similar, but traditionally for measuring diversity, entropy is the measure that's been used. So we used it here. And to show you a very similar plot, what we see is that in the post period, the entropy goes down, which signifies that the diversity reduces. And that means that there are fewer genres that are being represented in the Goodreads ecosystem, in the giveaways ecosystem, relative to what it was before. And to explore this a bit more, we try to understand where exactly is this shrinkage coming from. And what we see, interestingly, is that genres that already had a higher baseline proportion tend to increase their proportion more in the post-monetization period here, whereas genres that already had a low baseline proportion, so genres that were already niche in some sense, they shrink further. So here are just 6 illustrative examples. So you see genres like thriller and mystery had a fairly high proportion to begin with, and they gain more market share after monetization. Whereas genres like science and psychology, they had a lower proportion before, and that drops further. And to formalize this a bit more, we also do a regression where we see that the top quartile in terms of proportions gains 11% market share, whereas the bottom quartile loses 26% relative to their own baselines. So obviously, it's quite a sizable effect here. And this is the regression that demonstrates that. Okay, so finally, we want to move on to the consumers and try and understand the impact on reviews and ratings. So let's do a quick recap of what we have so far. We see that monetization leads to supply concentration, an increase in big five publishers, and a decrease in genre diversity. So now you want to understand how does this affect the reputation of books that actually enter giveaways. So now we will model the reviews and ratings data that's associated with each of these books to get a sense of reputational effects. And also, so far we had been looking across books. So we had been seeing what happens to books that participate in a giveaway before monetization versus after. But now we are also going to be able to look within a given book. So for a book, what happens to its ratings after it decides to put itself on a giveaway. So basically, this will allow us to look at both the impact of giveaway participation as a whole, as well as the additional effects of monetization. And the caveat with this analysis, of course, is that these measurements are only going to be defined for giveaways that happen after release. So there are some books which participate in a giveaway before they have accumulated any reviews at all, so right when they are being released. So we are not going to be able to look at those books here, but the majority of books are post-release giveaways, so we'll be able to make some conclusions about that. Sawan has a question, I think.
Yeah, so wondering why you not make it causal? You have a clean treatment happening here.
Sorry,
I'm saying that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, better now.
Okay, so I'm saying that what is stopping from making it a more causal analysis? If you can, we have a clear treatment happening in 2018. We have big five publishers that can be taken as a treatment, and the control group is there as in all other genres. You can show the pre-trends, and a clean trend is already visible. I mean, so have you already done it and not shown till now?
Right. Yeah, of course. So I guess for the presentation, I'm focusing more on the plots, but eventually the way that we are setting it up is as a causal analysis, as you said, and then you would have, standard regressions where you would kind of compare before and after. And for this analysis as well, we have a difference in difference type setup where we are trying to see what happens to a given book after monetization relative to before, and also what happens pre versus post giveaway. So yeah, that's definitely the overall setup. So yeah, you're right about that. All right. So what do we see here? We first model, as Sawan was suggesting, we are kind of in a difference in difference framework where we are looking at the number of ratings as well as the average rating. And we have fixed effects for the books, we have fixed effects for time. And then we are kind of going to compare what happens to a book pre versus post giveaway. And also we are going to see what's the additional effect of participating in a giveaway after monetization. So the assumption here is we are kind of comparing books that participate post-monetization versus pre-monetization, and then we have done pre-trends analysis, which kind of suggests that that's a reasonable thing to do because we don't see very sharp differences in the pre-trends. And later on, we also do a triple difference, which I'll talk about briefly in a second, which kind of accounts for parallel trend violations as well. So we have that specification too. So when we estimate this, what we see is that for the number of ratings, ignoring this part, this beta 2 part, if we just model the number of ratings as a function of pre versus post giveaway, we still see that the number of ratings does go up in the post period. And then when we estimate this whole equation, we see that post monetization, the effect is even bigger. So relative to pre-monetization, the number of ratings goes up even more in the post period. And there is a similar pattern in average ratings in the sense that just post giveaway, there is a negative and significant effect on average ratings, and this goes down further in the post monetization period. So that's essentially what we see. And what could be the mechanism behind this finding? We propose that the reason for this, as I was hinting at before, is that consumers are less likely to find the things that they are looking for, and therefore, if they get something for free, it is going to kind of increase the uptake, but it's going to decrease satisfaction because they are not a good fit for what exactly this product is. And there has been previous work that has shown that products that are acquired under a promotion tend to attract lower ratings due to tenuous user product match. And our hypothesis is that this effect is further amplified post-monetization because there is a concentration of supply and the long tail shrinks, as we saw, that there are now fewer genres and there are fewer publishers, and this results in a smaller choice set for consumers to kind of choose from when they are looking at what giveaways should I participate in. And what we see is that the user product fit worsens post giveaway, and it worsens even more post monetization. And to look at this mechanism, we look at two different measures. So first, we will look at the dispersion in ratings. And second, we look at the presence of fit-related attributes in the review text. So this is a previous paper that I had, where we kind of looked at how negative reviews come about. And we found that negative reviews often come not just due to poor quality, but also due to user product fit mismatches. And we use a similar method here to try and understand what's happening to the text of reviews after a book decides to participate in monetization. So in terms of the first measure, which is the dispersion of ratings, it's helpful to think of what we should expect if there is fit mismatch. So to signify mismatch, we would expect asymmetric changes in the variance of book ratings. So books that are already high rated before giveaway, books that are generally higher quality, you can say, would attract more negative ratings with mismatch, and this means their rating variance would increase. On the other hand, books that are low rated pre-giveaway would tend to attract even more negative ratings if there is mismatch, and this means that variance would decrease in this case. And that's kind of what we find. So we plot the post giveaway times post monetization coefficient, and the dependent variable is the standard deviation. And what we see is that for the lower rating levels, so basically this is the rounded mean rating of the book before it decided to participate in a giveaway. And we see that if the rounded average rating is 1 and 2, then the variance tends to go down even further, which means it's attracting even more negative ratings. Whereas if it's a 5-star book, if it's at a higher level, the variance tends to increase. So a higher rated book is actually attracting more low ratings. Then
Yeah, maybe I missed it. Is there a reviewer fixed effect in your regression?
Is there a reviewer fixed effect? So here actually the specification I showed you, we are kind of averaging. So we don't have the individual reviewers. We have the average review of book J in month T. So here we don't have reviewer fixed effects, but we do have a specification where we have individual reviews. And there we have a term for the sequence of the review. So there is some work in the literature before that has shown that, over time, maybe reviews go up or go down in a systematic way. So we control for that in that specification. But here it's aggregated at the month level.
So is there a possibility that after post monetization, the quality of the characteristics of reviewers might be different?
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. So, so how do you mean? So, do you have a thought on how that might happen?
The platform is now attracting probably a different kind of reviewers.
Mm-hmm. And you think that's because they have the assortment changes and maybe the kinds of people on the platform changes as well, something like that?
I have in mind, so the good quality reviewers, they might be now thinking this platform is now charging fees, so let's punish them and just go out of this platform.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it could be a possibility. I don't know if it's what.
Sure. No, that's a good point. We'll think about that more. So what we do see is that the number of reviews as a whole kind of goes up. So if anything, you have more people reviewing in the post period. But yeah, we can think of some way in which to kind of model the types of reviewers or to see whether their characteristics changes in some ways. So that's a good point. Yeah.
Sounds good.
We haven't done that here. Cool. That's a good suggestion. All right. So next we look at the text of reviews to see if there is more fit mismatch visible in the text as well. So as I was saying, negative reviews often arise not just due to poor quality, but due to this mismatch issue. So we train a classifier which can distinguish between fit-related and quality-related negative reviews. And yeah, let's not go into the details of that. And then the idea is, if it's a fit-related negative review, it's kind of going to talk about very subjective things. So here it says, I found the dialogue unrealistic and I thought this character is just an idiot, etc., etc. Whereas if it's a primarily quality-related negative review, it's going to talk more about the aspects of writing, and here they're saying, the switching narrator thing was, they did not like that, or the writing is good, but there is a meandering, there is meandering overall, which makes the story lag, etc. So the idea behind the classifier is to be able to distinguish these two classes of reviews. And if there is really fit mismatch, we would expect more reviewers in the post monetization period to leave reviews like this, because they got a book that they are clearly not a good fit for. And that's eventually what we find. So we see that post giveaway, the proportion of fit-related negative reviews goes up as a whole, and then post monetization, this effect is amplified further, just as with our other metrics. So we see that fit mismatch seems to be a likely mechanism which is driving this consumer dissatisfaction. Okay, triple difference. So what we do here is looking at the pre and post for books that participate before and after monetization. We also have a more stringent specification, which is the triple difference, which accounts for violation in trends, etc. Won't go into the details of that in the interest of time, but in a nutshell, we find something very similar. So we see that the volume of reviews goes up for books that participate in in giveaways after monetization. And similarly, we see that the average rating goes down for this set of books. Okay. So before concluding quickly, I want to show you some things that we did out of platform. So there was a comment as well about general equilibrium effects, which we don't get into, but something that we do see is that buzz on Twitter also seems to be affected as a result of this. So although the overall mention of Goodreads does not change before versus after monetization, the mention of Goodreads giveaways does change. So there does seem to be something happening here, and the tweet engagement is also affected. So there are fewer unique users and fewer retweets for tags which involve Goodreads giveaways. And this kind of tells us that word of mouth on broader social media is affected. And the idea here is that although giveaways was being touted as a way in which the visibility of these books might be raised, it seems to be backfiring. So that's another piece of evidence which kind of shows that. All right, so to conclude, monetization is a pressing challenge for all platform businesses, and we see here that monetizing Goodreads giveaway program has some novel consequences. We see that participation shrinks and there is concentration in suppliers, as well as a skew in the diversity of genres. And we see that although giveaways stimulate more reviews, these reviews tend to be more negative on average. And the underlying mechanism is that of preference mismatch. So if there is a shrinking long tail and there is supply concentration, there are fewer buyers who match with the books that they actually like. And we also find some evidence of spillovers happening outside the platform. So eventually the recommendation is to promote more engagement and to ensure diverse offerings. Goodreads needs to offer separate incentives to independent publishers or to books in niche genres to make sure that the ecosystem is protected. And finally, they also need to implement something like giveaway recommendations, for example, to promote better user product matches. And this is something that Goodreads can do fairly easily because their recommendation algorithm is actually quite good, and there is a lot of talk about that being one of the main reasons that Amazon actually acquired Goodreads. So that's a tool they already have, and maybe they want to use it in their giveaways ecosystem as well. All right, so with that, I will conclude and then we can have a more general discussion. Thanks a lot for your time and for the interesting questions. If you have any follow-ups, please feel free to email me. And yeah, thanks a lot.
I think we have some questions here.
Yes.
And then Nikita.
Let's do that.
Yeah, okay, so can I ask my question?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, okay, hi. Yeah, great talk. Thanks for this. So it's not a comment on your work, but it's just something that I thought we can think about. So why would you think it's optimal for the platform to sort of follow a strategy that worsens the user product fit? Right? Do you think it's because the consumer side is not monetized, or by the consumer side, I mean it's the reader side that's not the revenue generating side for the platform? So, I mean, did you guys think about it? Because this was something that that also sort of interests me in terms of other platforms, right? I mean, why would a platform want to implement something that actually is worsening the matching that it is primarily for?
That's a good point. So I think what's happening is, and maybe there are, in some ways, maybe Goodreads doesn't even realize that this was happening, because that's why we kind of called it an unintended consequence. So one thing, I mean, one way they were actually promoting the giveaway scheme is by saying that if you put your book on giveaways and people get it, you are going to get more buzz and you're going to get more reviews, and that will help with your visibility. So it is actually interesting that these effects haven't been really examined before, and maybe Goodreads themselves, they didn't think this would happen. So this mismatch issue, maybe that's something that's not obvious to them, because it's kind of, it's a small issue, and we only found it because we were explicitly focusing on analyzing this particular aspect. And obviously Goodreads has its own data scientists, but maybe this is not what they're focusing on, and this is a question they haven't answered. But yeah, I mean, this is something they should definitely keep in mind, and that's kind of the goal of our work as well, to say that there might be these issues which the platform might miss because they are focusing on other metrics which are more monetary in some sense. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Just one other small comment. Again, it's not a question, but I think a lot of what you are saying here can also sort of give us insights into how exclusive seller programs actually affect platform outcomes. By exclusive seller programs, you can think of programs like Zomato Gold, or for example, FBA, that actually is open to only exclusive sellers that buy into those programs, right? So I was wondering that, I mean, your work is very much, I mean, we can, I feel, also draw insights on those kind of things. But yeah, it's just a comment.
No, thanks. Yeah, that's definitely true. I think we are trying to look at these, different kinds of monetization policies and how they might impact the diversity and the kinds of participants you have. So for sure, yeah, I think that could be definitely an area. Yeah.
Great. Thanks. Great talk. Loved it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Akshay and then Tanmay.
Yeah, hi, Shrabastee.
Hi.
Thank you for this presentation. It's a very small question, actually. In the first part of your study, when you looked at the supply side effects, you looked at the concentration of genres. My question is, in the second part, when you are looking at average ratings, have you controlled for genres? Because if we are seeing lower ratings or lower fit, it's possible that now there is a concentration of those genres that had lower fit to begin with.
Right. No, that's a good question. So we do control for genres, since this analysis is kind of looking within books. So when we include book fixed effects, we implicitly account for any time invariant sorts of differences. across the books.
Okay.
So basically we are saying, what happens to the ratings of this particular book before versus after it decides to participate in giveaway. But that's definitely something to
All right, thank you.
Yeah, Tanmay.
Yeah, I think
Yes, go ahead.
just to reiterate my previous points, I think it might be helpful to think more about entry and exit, because the whole selection effect could be driven by that dynamic. And again, to augment Nikita's point, platforms might be thinking about initiating this kind of policy when they have a high market power. Probably, I'm not sure. Again, if the market power is not that high, then the whole dynamic of entry exit again might change. And what I think what would happen in the long run. So short term, these are, I mean, one can understand these things are happening, more concentration, drop in diversity. But so what do you think? So what would happen in the long run? I mean, I know it's not related to your paper probably, but just out of my curiosity.
No, that is a good point. I think, as you're saying, it does kind of depend on the exact market power. And in this case, in the case of Goodreads, as I was mentioning, they don't really have a direct competitor in the book market just because they have such a large user base and a very specialized user base. So in their case, maybe we can expect, if the giveaways ecosystem is not functioning well, we are kind of losing value as a whole. So the overall welfare effects are probably negative because it can't really recover. So once you have this barrier and independent authors start to drop out, probably it kind of propagates and there is no recovery from that. But if it's a platform where there is a lot of competition, things might be different. So there, if the platform kind of imposes a fee without taking into account these competitive effects, maybe people just migrate and the platform itself disintegrates, but the overall welfare effects maybe are not negative because people find a substitute for that. But definitely it's worth including a discussion of that when we kind of write this up, because those are important considerations, especially if you are thinking of a new platform who's trying to decide whether to monetize or not. What are the things they should keep in mind? So thanks for that thought.
Any more questions?
Yeah, just one quick comment. So in the long run, there may be some more innovation in the platforms. It may. I mean, when this market this kind of policies.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's why if, for example, Goodreads has a good recommender for kind of recommending books to consumers, as I was saying, then this matching process might not be hampered anymore, and maybe they can still find a way to, reverse this issue. But I mean, that's why these dynamics are very interesting.
Yeah. Savan.
So wonderful presentation, Professor Shrabastee.
Thank you.
Very cleanly explained what has been done. I'm also wondering, since you already have text on the reviews, have you gone through some text analytics exercise on this, or you're planning for another paper for that?
No, so we did do some text analysis for the fit versus quality related reviews, as
I mean, sort of topic modeling,
so
sentiment analysis, kind of things.
So right. So that was a small piece just to show that these fit related reviews are increasing. We have done that. We haven't done any topic analysis as of yet, but that might be an interesting piece to include just to see, how topics might be changing before versus after giveaways. We have thought about that a bit, but that's definitely, we do have that data, so it would be nice to do.
And also on the supply side, probably you didn't show the results, but there is a scope of DID there also, right?
On the supply side, yes. So in the supply side, we do have some DID type specifications. Potentially we could also do, some sort of matching and then try to do a more systematic DID. I agree with that. There is definitely some scope for that.
Okay, there is one question in the window Priya has written with regard to average customer reviews reducing post giveaways. It could happen that customers who receive the giveaway write reviews just to show their gratitude. So is this like self-selection effect taken into account? or control.
Right. No, that's a good point. So I think that's why we kind of wanted to look at the text and understand better what features are different in the post period. We focus on that particular fit aspect, and we see that reviews generally tend to have more of these fit mismatch issues. So from that perspective, we do find a shift in the content. In terms of controlling for whether the motivation of the reviewer is different, we haven't done that yet, to be honest, but it might be interesting to see whether these sorts of, so we can build models that can detect these, specific features in the text. For example, it could try to see whether the language in the post period is more related to gratitude or something like that. We haven't done that yet, but yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, in terms of self-selection, we just do what's standard in the sense that we have fixed effects for books and time, and then if we look at individual reviews, we can have some controls for those individual reviewer characteristics. But this we haven't done, so yeah, that's a good point.
Awesome. With that, I think we are done with the questions. Shrabastee, thanks once again for discussing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me. This was great. Thanks for all your great questions. And please feel free to reach out if you have any other thoughts. And thank you, Anuj, for inviting me. This was great.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Bye.